As a distinction from dysfunctional, I call it in my book defunctional. That when the life or your body is defunct, okay, it's outdated, and it needs to go through this change. But there's this death process. You can't just leap into this new form. It doesn't work that way. That's not quantum physics. Basic quantum physics in chaos theory is that when an organism has reached the highest level in which it can perform, it disintegrates into chaos, disorganization, so that it can then reorganize into a higher form.
2, 1, 0.
Hello and welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. This is your host, Orion. Change is the only constant in life. Just look at everything that happened in the last couple of years. There's a lot of changes. Change is not easy. It's hard. It puts you in a place of fear, but when you embrace it, magic happens. And you go from fear to faith, from being reactive to everything around you to being proactive and centered. And then life is good. Today's guest is Dr. Toni Galardi. She is an author, a guest expert, a television show host, a licensed clinical psychotherapist, astrologist, and career coach. She's the author of the groundbreaking book, The LifeQuake Miracle, Awakening to Your True Purpose at Times of Personal and Global Upheaval. In this episode, Dr. Toni talks about her book. She explained the 7 skills to becoming resilient to sudden change, how to read the signs, prepare, and finding your soul's true purpose. So you're going to be ready for your next chapter because we're always upgrading, aren't we? And now, without further ado, on to the show. Hello, Dr. Toni. Welcome to Stellar Life Podcast. I am very happy that you're here. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm very excited to talk to you.
It's my pleasure. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Before we begin, can you share a little bit about your passion or passions and how did you discover them?
Professionally or personally?
Nobody have ever asked me that. But I would love to know both.
Okay. They very much dovetail in many ways because what I love is making a difference in people's lives and facilitating and supporting this huge spiritual transition that's taking place on the planet. So even when I'm in my own life, whether it's friends or family or whatever it is, helping people to see what lights them up, how to get in touch with what lights them up is a lot of fun for me. Astrology is a lot of fun for me. So I'm passionate about a lot of things and passionate about helping people find their passion. So.
When I wrote my own mission statement, it was to light people up. And you use the same terminology, and I'm like, I like that. Yeah, I like to ignite people. Because I feel like everybody has a spark, something we just need to add a little bit of, positive fuel into that spark for them to be like, here I am. Yeah. Good morning. Hello, world.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about your book?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
So the name of the book is The LifeQuake Miracle, Awakening to Your True Purpose in Times of Personal and Global Upheaval. And the book really was written before, as we were going through this spiritual transition, but before we went into a massive global transition through the pandemic. So it was very timely. When I did Gaia TV, the first interview hit in April of 2020, and the nerve that it hit on the international level was huge. I just had hundreds of people reaching out who were really feeling burned out in their careers and really desirous of wanting to be doing something that you're spending most of your waking day in that really fuels them and lights them up. And I had gone through my own experience of not leaving something soon enough and having to kind of go through a lot of crisis and disasters before making major changes. So the book was really kind of came through my own life and the interviews, hundreds of interviews I did, including human potential pioneers who'd also gone through life quakes and come out the other side with their purpose and their mission. So there's also tools. It's a 7-stage model, so it helps people find what they're here to do. But I also give in each stage of the model what to do at the body level, the kind of supplements that are really appropriate for that stage, as well as emotional tools and spiritual tools as well. So.
Do you believe everybody has to go through some suffering in order to find themselves? Because I don't know of anybody that, just didn't go through anything and became something.
Well, it's degrees. It has to do with degrees. There were people I interviewed who just decided this isn't fun anymore and really had the faith in themselves and faith in the universe to leave something behind, take a break, and figure out what really did light them up. What are they here now to bring forth into the world? What is it that they feel drawn to and impassioned by? So there are people, but most people tend to wait until a massive crisis hits their lives. They don't pay attention to the signs. And that's what the first 2 stages of the model are meant to be. They're meant to be to show you, to look for the subtle cues. There are subtle cues that are trying to tell you it's time for a change. And most people ignore them. And instead, what they do is self-medicate.
Yeah. How do we look for the signs? How do we recognize the signs?
Keeping a dream journal is one way. If you put intention behind keeping a journal by your bed and having as an intention, when I awaken in the morning, I'm remembering my dreams. And all I want to know is, what is my next step? Okay? You can, obviously I was trained as a Jungian psychotherapist, so when I work with clients individually, I know how to help them interpret their dreams, but it's something one can begin to get messages from the dream time telling you it's time to change. It's time to let go of what you've been doing. Another way is synchronicities. If you pay attention to what are the messages that are coming from the universe through people, through animals. Animals can bring us medicine, in the shamanic tradition. And messages that, go here, be directed here. So I pay attention to those when I keep hearing the same kind of message in different places.
What type of messages people get in dreams from your experience or from your experience with your clients or from your own personal experience? But what do you see in dreams that is like a big sign or a big aha?
If there's in a dream, if you are being shown that you're either sick, I've had a client recently, was being given a dream like that, that she was being told that she had Hashimoto's thyroiditis and that it was deadly. Now, Hashimoto's is not deadly. It's a thyroid and it's an autoimmune disorder of the thyroid. However, through the dream, what we were breaking down was that her throat chakra was blocked. So she was not communicating. She works for a major company in the San Francisco Bay Area and making great money and supporting her whole family, including her husband. So she was being shown that literally if she let it go long enough, it may not be Hashimoto's that kills her, but if you cut off your voice, your communication, and speak and you don't speak your truth, right? That what ends up happening is the immune system can attack you, and it can show up in the form of cancer. That's a disorder of the immune system. So dreams can absolutely give us messages. Symptoms, very very subtle symptoms, or mild to severe addictions that start showing up. Too much time on the internet. can be a subtle addiction that we don't think of on the nose the way we think of alcohol and drugs, right? But people who start or are eating more or eating less, I went through both phases in my journey in a LifeQuake, where I was I went through a phase of getting very, very skinny, and because my body was changing and my spirit was leaving my body, basically. So there are lots of signs that are showing you something needs to change, and if you don't pay attention, then catastrophic crisis has to happen to force you, for example, out of a job. Because I had another client who, in the dream, she was being fired from her job. And she had been fired from a job prior to that. And her message from that dream was, I need to start really getting on this thing of finding what I'm here to do so that I don't have to get fired this time. I can be proactive, Animal totems can come to us. The same animal can show up, giving us messages, for example. So it's about how aware are you willing to be versus how much in denial are you holding on to the old life, something that's already dying, And when we deny that our life is really changing dramatically, then we have to go through it the hard way. But it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. It starts with a feather, and then it's the brick, and then it's the Mack truck, and you don't want to wait till the Mack truck to show.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
There were so many things, so many questions I have to what you just told me. Like first, so her throat chakra was blocked, and she came to that realization, and that she has to speak her truth. How did she go from being so blocked and not being able to speak her truth to actually doing it?
Well, part of my work is clearing energy blocks, So the way that I do career coaching is very unique. It's very mystical in many ways, because I look at someone's astrology chart, and that can show me blockages that we come into this life with, that need to be, cleared before any action or any discovery can even happen as to what you're here to is your soul purpose. So then, because I have a training as a shaman, I do energetic clearing. In this case, the throat chakra needed to be cleared in order for her to be able to speak what was really her truth. So, but that's something someone can do, by putting hands over their throat, and, for example, if it's that area, and sending healing energy and being willing to be guided, to say to the universe, I'm ready. I'm willing to surrender my ego, my mind, to what is the highest and greatest will and good for me, And when we do that with humility, really, and grace, then it can come through much more gently, than when we're in denial.
Right. And so what happened with her?
So
she got activated, and
we cleared that throat chakra, and then we started looking at what is it that she works in a technical position in the software industry, but what she was really passionate about was spiritual things, spiritual workshops. And what we got to, because she's very detail oriented, was that that she didn't want to be a workshop leader, because she did a coaching training and she realized, I really don't think I'm equipped to be a coach. But what we really got to was that what she wants to really do, I asked a lot of questions. I do, the way that I carved this out was that she could be a producer. She could actually help people who do that, who are workshop leaders, who are teachers, who don't want to have to do the marketing piece and don't want to have to find the venue, for example, for a retreat center or a hotel or something like that to give a workshop. Now that things are opening up and people are giving live things again, that she could be the behind the scenes person, and that's what she's most comfortable with. But she wanted to do it in a spiritual domain, an arena. So we kind of got to that, and that got her very excited. So all I suggested at this point was research. Was going on LinkedIn and seeing who are the coaches out there who want to be able to give workshops but don't want to have to do all the enrollment and the ground, detail and the grunt work. So
Yeah.
that's one
Yeah, I'm
example.
one of those people. Just like,
Ah,
just let me go and teach
uh-huh.
and that's it. I don't want to handle out all the details, even though I kind of
Yeah.
like producing stuff. But when it comes to a big event
Uh-huh.
and marketing, I'm like, oh God, I don't want that headache. So perfect, perfect.
Uh-huh.
You
Mm-hmm.
said that you went through periods of times where you gained weight, you lost weight, and you,
Mm-hmm.
you used the word my spirit left my body. What does that mean?
There was a massive it was about around age 30, and I was married, and I was a traditionally trained psychotherapist, and realized that that I could feel my body was morphing, and I no longer had any desire for drinking any alcohol. I was raised Italian, so we had wine on the table every night. The wine just became just abhorrent to me. I didn't want to drink that. I was actually being drawn at that time to milk, and it was like my body was going through this. I was going back almost to a young version of myself.
Wow.
And so I was losing weight because I had really very little desire for food. So there was, my spirit was awakening, but the body, the form of the body that it was in was no longer, it was outdated. I call it, as a distinction from dysfunctional, I call it in my book defunctional. That when the life or your body is defunct, okay, it's outdated, and it needs to go through this change. But there's this death process. You can't just leap into this new form. It doesn't work that way. That's not quantum physics. Basic quantum physics in chaos theory is that when an organism has reached the highest level in which it can perform, it disintegrates into chaos, disorganization, so that it can then reorganize into a higher form. The Egyptians in ancient Egypt knew this, and it took the form of, they had the myth of the phoenix bird. This is the myth of the phoenix bird. They
My
understood these
favorite.
very archetypal principles before we knew of something such as quantum physics. So it's a truism in nature.
Do you feel
But
like the
most people are
world?
too frightened. We want to be in spring and summer all the time.
Yeah.
And fall has to come, and winter has to come. It's cyclical inside of everyone's life. And
Right.
that's how life works. We're probably leaving a bull market. We've had a bull market for a long time, longer than usual, and we may go into a bear market, where we have to tighten our belts a little bit, and we have to be a little bit more mindful about how we spend money during this new transition. But it's all cyclical. Everything, comes in cycles.
Is this what you see astrologically coming to us?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
tell me more.
Yeah. Well, Pluto is in the very last stages of the sign of Capricorn. Capricorn rules society. So it's not just in the US, it's all internationally. That's why what got created was something that was going to unite the entire planet. Okay? And whether it took the form of, one thing or another, there was going to be some phenomenon we knew was coming that would unite everyone into this transformation. And it has been transformational. People are questioning. There's a massive career transition going on worldwide. Okay? People are
Plus
leaving their
AI that
jobs.
is going to become smarter than us very soon.
And there's that. But there's always going to be a need for the human potential.
Yeah.
Always. And the next, with Uranus now in Taurus, and that's an 84-year cycle, we're going to have to go through a change in how we deal with money. Okay, we will probably become a digital economy, and that will be an adjustment for humans, for some humans, and then there could be some requirement of values changing, and spending money on things that really matter, that really help you with your spiritual transformation, so like that.
So many questions. I'm trying to find to think about the first one that comes to mind. I'm like, yeah, wait. First, do you think that everything we went through in this last 2.5 years was a part of this quantum chaos in order for us to rise?
No question. No question. This has been coming. We've been in a spiritual transition. And when there's an evolutionary leap in consciousness, there's a speed up. Something had to, as I mentioned, had to connect the entire planet. What was going to do that, So it really took a form of an organism that really had everyone having forced to go home, right? As a result of being at home, there was more evaluation of people's marriages, of the way they were running their families. Many people who were working outside the home had to start looking at what was going on with their children, reevaluating how they spent money. So all of this is part and parcel to this spiritual transition. But we're not out of the woods. It's just beginning. So.
Well, do you think we're heading into a recession?
That's been predicted, yes. However, and I've said this before, I was interviewed on a podcast in Dublin, Ireland, not too long ago, and I said, people, if you are entrepreneurial, if you think in terms of opportunity, that the Chinese symbol for crisis is also opportunity, right?
Really?
So
Wow.
inside people who during the Great Depression was around the world, that hit the U.S. and the entire planet in the 30s, there were people who made a lot of money because they saw where the opportunity was. They didn't buy into the fear, to the matrix, and instead were looking for where can there be opportunity. And that's what I'm seeing a lot in the millennial generation. That they're, creating things. If you look at LinkedIn, you'll see that people are creating coaching programs that are really unique. They're making money in unique ways. And that's what it takes, is not getting sucked into what the matrix out there, what you hear on the news. It's all bad, recessions can happen. They're part of a cycle. But you can, if you use the recession correctly, and you don't get, sucked into the fear, you can, create opportunities for greater wealth.
Right. How do you not get sucked into the fear, where fear is all over, and even like for me as an empath, sometimes I'm like,
is one example.
Come again? What did you say?
Meditation is one example of that. That if you meditate and you really drop in to your inner self, you step out of, so your observer self, when the more that you develop the muscle of the observer self, so the observer self is watching the mind, and watching the mind buying into fear, buying into whatever the news is saying, or whatever, and you step back and you ask the self, the soul, what would you have me know? What do I need to know here? What is the truth? By going, heart math was developed a number of years ago to help people go into their hearts and understand the frequency of the heart, because the heart doesn't lie. So if you get still enough, and you develop a mindfulness practice every day, you can drop out of that outer, chaos, and hear and listen. What is the higher self trying to tell me?
Mm-hmm. I find it's very hard to get into the habit of mindfulness, and the habit of. I remember, like, before I had my baby, I have a 2.5-year-old son, and prior to that, like, going into meditation whenever I want, and even going to the gym, and doing all this self-care was so much easier. Now I homeschool my little one, and I'm like, it just seems like at the end of the day, I wake up and he wakes up together with me, and at the end of the day, I'm just like, oh, just let me watch something on Netflix that is like like I don't
Mm,
want to think about being mindful. I don't want to think about everything. I'm tired. Just want to watch something silly and go to sleep or do
mhm,
something like browse the internet, whatever.
mhm.
So how do you
So what time does your little one wake up in the morning?
7:30?
Okay.
But if I wake
So,
up
you know,
prior to him, he will wake up when I wake up usually. He kind of he
uh-huh.
sends me.
Ah, okay. All right. Because, I for a long time belonged to a meditation yoga called Siddha Yoga. And when you would go to the retreat center in upstate New York, there would be whole families, and children are taught from the time they're very, very little to meditate, actually. And it's
Nice.
actually good to
Maybe
get
I should
kids.
try it with him. That will be very interesting.
Hmm. Yeah. If you did something like maybe listening to a guided meditation, you know, maybe that would be one way of teaching him to get quiet, to learn how to get quiet. Children who come through meditation lineages are very different kind of kids in terms of their ability to handle stress when they get into school.
Mm, that's so cool. Thank you for that. I'll do it.
Yeah,
I want to say I'll try it,
yeah.
but as Yoda said, do or do not, there is no try. I will do that.
Hmm. Hmm. So if he, gets restless or whatever, because babies do when they're two, you can just stay still. You're modeling that. So
Mm,
just, lay down and stay still in your space, and he may get up or whatever. But if he sees you doing that, he'll start to model that over time. It may not happen like that, right? But over time, I've seen this. I've seen children very young learning to meditate. So,
that's so cool. I'll definitely do it. Um, you said you're a shaman. How do you become a shaman? What was the calling there? What was the process of becoming a shaman? It sounds so mystical and interesting.
mhm. I would say from a conscious level, from a conscious, I didn't choose it. It chose me.
Huh.
You know, it came to me. My first experience with mysticism was I had never done yoga before and went on a yoga retreat. And it was my first experience with yoga, and she did this long session of yoga. I went back to my room, and when we were on a break, and I started having this kind of change in my breath. My breathing was changing, and my breathing started becoming very rapid, and I saw myself falling through space into a
Oh,
dark hole. And I heard a voice saying, "You're dying. You're dying." Now, I was trained in my 20s when I was in grad school and after in something called Gestalt therapy at that time. And the man who created Gestalt therapy, Fritz Perls, used to say, "Lose your mind and come to your senses." And I was hearing that mantra. It was like a mantra going through my head: lose your mind and come to your senses. Because I thought I was losing my mind. It felt like what started happening was a number of mystical experiences were coming to me. And my period stopped, for 9 months, and I was, only, I think at that point I was 29 or 30. And so all these mystical, and then I went to Peru. I was guided to go to Machu Picchu, and there met a woman who was a shaman and took me into an initiation that radically changed my life, for sure. So I was put through. But let me tell you something. It's not glamorous. It is not for the faint of heart. When you choose that from the other side, I imagine, coming into this life, your soul contract, you're taking on ego death. Like you're saying to the universe, I'm ready and willing to go through lessons in non-attachment, over and over again. I'm ready to be tested to my ability to have trust and faith in the universe. So
tested
I
like
went through
what?
many
What are the tests?
uh, losing everything you have,
Huh.
losing
It's a big test.
economic, that can happen. I was I had a couple of near-death experiences, one of which I almost lost my life due to a mold infestation in my home, a very toxic mold.
Oh, wow.
And I had to walk away. My environmental consultant came out to, when we finally figured out why I was getting sick, and it was in my house, the consultant said to me, you have to leave this, behind, everything here. Or get a mold remediation expert out here, which is very expensive to do. And so I had to walk away. I had to live in a motel. I talk about this in my book, The LifeQuake Miracle. I had nothing, none of my things with me. And it was a lesson in non-attachment, totally, a lesson in non-attachment. Because I was being given, doctors were telling me this is tied to 20 different kinds of cancers. You've been exposed to this for a long time, because I found out they had covered it up. My landlord had covered it up.
Oh,
And
wow.
I had a beach house. So there were a lot, it was a very, very difficult time, to be without anything and to have to rely on the divine for guidance, because my material life was gone and I couldn't work. So I wasn't making money. That's just one of many examples.
Yeah, it sounds
I
very
had a massive
difficult.
Kundalini awakening.
It sounds very difficult. What does a shaman woman do compared to a psychotherapist or an astrologist or a coach?
It's an intuitive calling, So you're really meant to. You have to go through this kind of morphing process with your body. Your body is put through it. You don't choose it consciously, and you go through a morphing process over and over again until your body becomes much more able to do something called shape-shifting. And I haven't talked about that a lot on camera, but shape-shifting is that ability to kind of leave the physical form, and move into someone else's body, and help them shift and change, and then move back into your form, your
My
present
goodness.
form. So
That's very tasking. It sounds very difficult.
well, no, it becomes easier and easier. Yeah, it's not for everyone, for sure. But those who are called to do this work are there to help facilitate others, in terms of their own kind of morphing into new form. So to be a guide. So I'm definitely a guide.
Right. And how do you not take on others' pain or suffering?
Well, empathy is not taking on people's pain. It's really about being able to hold space for someone's pain, because you're, while at the same time seeing their highest potential. When you go into sympathy, you are then taking on someone's pain and suffering. But if you
Okay.
come to every client, no matter how horrific their story, but if you come to every person from the point of view of seeing and holding their highest potential inside whatever suffering they're going through, that you see their whole self. You do not see them as fractured and wounded, but you see them in their highest potential, and you hold that space, then you're not going to take on the wounded persona. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, it's completely and beautifully said.
Uh-huh.
How did you come up with the title of your book?
LifeQuake, the term LifeQuake came to me. That word came to me. And then the 7 stages of the model came to me, because what I was looking for was a word that would describe something that happens that looks on the outside. And this is what my book, every stage of the book, is about: what things appear to be from the outside perspective and what's really going on a soul level. So what a lifequake is the soul waking up to the next level of its evolution. So it can look like crisis, it can look like chaos on the outside, but what's really happening is rebirth, right? When a woman is pregnant, right, if you think about, if you didn't know you were pregnant, right, and you were throwing up, and you were tired all the time, and your stomach was getting swollen and big, and then you had contractions, whatever, you'd think you were dying.
Right.
You would think something was seriously wrong with you, right? And yet there is a being growing inside of all of that chaos that you're experiencing. The same thing is true with a spiritual pregnancy. Same thing.
Yeah.
That we have to go through this kind of emergence of the soul to its next level of consciousness. And dependent on how much resistance we have, how much the ego resists that change, is really informs how severe the chaos has to be in many ways.
Without going into the depth of it, of course, can you take us through the steps just briefly?
I can take you through some of the stages, sure.
Yes, yes.
The first stage of the model, because if you read the book, you'll get the depth of each stage with the tools that I
Yes,
give
yes, for
for
sure.
each stage. The first stage is boredom. But it's a kind of boredom that's not chronic boredom. It's boredom that comes from that you've outgrown something, and it's that feeling of I just know not what. I can't put my finger on what is just not right anymore in my life. And what a lot of people do is they quell the boredom, and they quell that boredom by eating a little more or drinking a little more or surfing the net a little more to distract themselves from that feeling instead of
Yes.
sitting with the feeling. Because
We
boredom
do
is a
everything we can
transition
to run
emotion.
away from that pain of
Right,
boredom or any pain. I noticed myself just
right.
lately how much I'm doing it because I'm at that stage where I'm doing the deep work and I'm looking into my traumas and my pain and things that were not handled for years and years, or I thought they were like gone, or I shoved them under the rug. And for me, like, it's interesting what you said about this chaos period because I feel like I'm going through that, and I'm finding the gifts in that. I definitely see the gift in it because if I didn't go through all that, I would never take the time to look for healing and be forced to just sit with with what is, which is the hardest thing. It's so like this is this world is so fast and there are so many distractions and things that you can just shift and into instead of just let's be here with myself, go in, stay with it. So yeah, that like I bet everybody that is listening right now has experienced this boredom.
Yeah, so it's a transition emotion.
Mm-hmm.
On the emotional tone scale, boredom is the middle. Right here. It's the midpoint. If you despair is at the very lowest point of the emotional tone scale, and ecstasy is at the very highest point of the emotional tone scale. Boredom's right in the middle. So if you actually start to take action and be in the inquiry of, okay, if I'm no longer enjoying my job, for example, but you're in the inquiry of, okay, but what is interesting me? What do I find where does my energy go up now, as opposed to any other time? Okay? Just noticing and keep collecting information, just keeping a record of what am I finding I'm curious about now or interested in now. And if you keep a list of that, you'll start to move the energy up. If you do nothing, and instead you use addiction and subtle forms of addiction at this point, what ends up happening is in stage 2, you start to become depressed. And that depression actually is coming out of the soul, pulling you away from the life you had that's no longer viable. Okay? It's a death process. It's the beginning of the old life dying. And so things, that there's an enhancement from boredom to depression that takes place. And where it really becomes hard to sometimes get up in the morning and go to that job or whatever. So that's why that first stage is so critical. If you start to really gather data and embrace death. We don't have a place in our culture for death. We make death bad, we make growing old bad, right? Something to fear. But if you embrace death, that, okay, this part of my life is no longer, it's no longer viable for me to be doing this in this way. So I'm just going to wait. I'm going to stay quiet. I'm going to listen. I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to observe. Just what is it that's needing to be released? Because this is a stage of releasing. I am beginning to release an old life. So what is it that I'm dying to? And then stage 3 is the radical severance stage. And that's when people, turn in their resignation, or they end a marriage, whatever it might be that creates radical severance from the old life. And that is what leads to stage 4, which is that in between, what I call it the cosmic barbecue. There's a period of time where you're not supposed to just jump into a new life. The old life is gone, but it's about being in that uncertainty.
That's the hardest part, I feel, that the in between.
It is very hard.
The journey,
It
the
is.
stagnation.
But
feeling.
if you take the time to go in and really look at the shadow, what are the things how have I limited myself in my life? What fears have I had stop me from living a full life? Because when we, in stage 5, it's the beginning of the new, it's apprenticing into your new life. Okay, so, but if you jump into that stage 5 without first examining what didn't work about how I did my life before, you're going to just try to recreate the old life, basically. Find somebody, to relationship-wise, so you're not alone, you don't have to feel lonely. Get a job just so that you have financial security, whatever it is. If you jump too quickly into trying to create new form, and you don't really take the time to let yourself peel back the layers of false identity, what you identified with in this outer world, and be willing to stay with yourself, stay with those feelings, mourn the old life, grieve, that old life, and begin to notice, what is it that wants to show itself now? What is it that's wanting to emerge now, And toward the end of stage 4, if you take that time, if you're still enough, and you're continuing to gather data of what is it that excites me now, or what is it that I'm finding myself drawn to now? It may not even be excitement. It may just be what you're curious about. That if you do that work, you will start to receive, what is called a calling. At the end of stage 4, there is messages that are drawing you, if you listen to the soul, toward what is it that is my new mission in life.
It's beautiful. And for the rest, we'll have to get the book. Dun dun dun. Well, it sounds amazing, and I'm really having a good time here, like listening to everything that you're sharing, and I really feel your light and the multi-dimensional and the fullness of who you are. It's pretty awesome. Like I can totally see your light, and it's beautiful.
Thank you.
Before we say goodbye for now, what are your 3 top tips to living a stellar life?
Well, the word stellar, because I'm an astrologer as well, resonates for me in terms of, I would say, astrology saved my life, really. So paying attention to the planets, the moon, for example, like when starting things between the new moon and the full moon is a really, just like the Farmer's Almanac suggests that, when planting things into the earth, it's the same thing. So when we start things between the new moon and the full moon, which we're in right at the moment, things tend to grow more easily, So astrology can be a great gift, which is why I created, for those who can't afford to work with me on a personal level, I created this tribe that for $35 a month a person can join and do a live activation with me once a month on the new moon. And everyone gets an opportunity to put into this very powerful quantum field that I build their intention for the month. And people have had miracles. That's why I call it the LifeQuake Miracles tribe.
Oh, wow. What
So
kind of
joining
miracles?
that, Oh, well, one woman moved from California to Toronto, where her husband's family lived, and she couldn't get pregnant in Marin. It was really interesting in Marin County, where she was, and is an acupuncturist. And when they moved to Toronto, she got pregnant pretty quickly, number one. And out of, she also has now a toddler. She started to realize, and this is somebody who was rather quiet demeanor, Chinese American, and started to get this kind of thing about through the LifeQuake Miracles tribe and putting her intentions out around doing professional speaking. So she's now doing professional speaking in addition to being an acupuncturist.
Oh, beautiful.
So that's one example. So the LifeQuake Miracles tribe is really an opportunity. That's one way of really being able to manifest out of a group consciousness, things into the world. And the third thing is, I would say meditation. I know it's, I really believe that meditation can still the mind, and in a time of great chaotic transition on the planet, it helps you to step back from that matrix, and one that's connected to lack, and to lean back into your higher self, and listen for your soul purpose, and be guided. Many of the things we talked about will help by looking at synchronicities and tips, from the dreams, guiding you into your next transition.
Right. So you
And
said,
finding a mentor. I would say that, helps as well, finding a mentor.
yes, for sure. Amazing. Where can people find you and buy your books? Join the, was it the life, what was the name of the
The
tribe?
LifeQuake Miracles tribe. So if
Join
you
the
go to
life.
my website,
Yeah.
if you go to drtonigalardi.com, drtonigalardi.com, or lifequake.com, you can join the Miracles tribe. And the book can be either purchased in a downloadable form through my website, both of those websites, as well as Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Amazing. Dr. Toni, thank you so, so much for everything you shared with us
Welcome.
today. And thank
Absolutely,
you,
you're
listener.
welcome.
Remember to look into astrology, meditate, find a mentor, and have a stellar life. This is Orion. Till next time.